We spend so much of our lives waiting for someone to give us the green light. We look to parents, teachers, society, and friends as if they hold some secret authority over our existence. But have you noticed that the world never really stops and points at you and says, "Now you are allowed to live as yourself"? No such moment ever arrives, because the permission you are waiting for was never meant to come from outside. It was meant to come from within you. You see, there's no referee standing at the edge of life keeping score of how well you followed the rules. The so-called rules are made by other people who were also trying to make sense of their own insecurities. And if you look closely, you'll see that the structure of society is nothing more than a stage play, with actors who have forgotten they are acting. We slip into roles, son, daughter, worker, partner, and we begin to confuse the costume for the person. But beneath all those roles, there is a presence, an awareness that is simply you, and that you has no need for permission to exist. Think of it this way. A tree doesn't ask if it's allowed to grow. A bird doesn't fill out an application before it sings. The river doesn't seek approval before it flows. They are simply expressions of life, moving with the rhythm of existence. And so are you. Yet, unlike the tree or the bird, we carry this peculiar burden of doubt, this idea that we must be validated before we can breathe fully, before we can speak our truth. What a strange thing it is to silence the song in your chest, all because you're afraid it doesn't match someone else's tune. Life is not waiting for you to get it right. Life is waiting for you to be alive. And being alive is messy, imperfect, unpredictable. To insist that you must have permission before you can dance, sing, love, or create is to miss the very point of existence. For the only authority that matters is the rhythm beating inside you. And when you listen to it, when you allow yourself to move with it, you discover that you are always free, long before anyone told you otherwise. From the very beginning of our lives, we are trained to look outward for signs of approval. As children, we look to our parents to see if our behavior is acceptable. A smile means yes, a frown means no, and slowly we begin to associate our sense of worth with the reactions of others. Then we go to school, where teachers grade our work and tell us if we passed or failed. We enter society, where every step seems to be measured against standards, expectations, and invisible rules without even realizing it. We build the belief that our very existence needs to be justified, that we must earn the right to be who we are. But the truth, if you stop and really look, is that this idea of needing permission is nothing more than an illusion, a trick of the mind that has been passed from generation to generation. No one anywhere has the power to grant you the right to exist, because you already exist. That simple fact is undeniable. The moment you were born, life itself had already stamped its approval on you. You did not appear here because of a committee decision, nor were you placed on earth by some external authority giving you a certificate that says, "Now you may be." You are here because life willed it, because the universe unfolded in such a way that your presence became inevitable. And yet, we spend much of our time behaving as if we still need someone to tap us on the shoulder and say, "Now you may live freely." It never comes, because it doesn't need to. Think for a moment about the absurdity of waiting for permission. Who exactly are you waiting for? Society? Which part of society? Your neighbors, your co-workers, the people who barely know you on the street? Or perhaps some abstract idea of culture, tradition, or the collective? But if you look carefully, you will see that society is nothing more than a collection of individuals, each one of them just as uncertain and insecure as you are. Each person is wrapped up in their own struggles, their own worries, their own attempts to gain approval from others. So if you're waiting for society to give you permission, you are really waiting for other people who are also waiting. It is a never-ending circle of hesitation. Like actors standing on a stage, each one looking at the other to decide who will speak first. This illusion of permission is deeply ingrained. It hides in the way we hesitate to speak up in a group, in the way we ask for reassurance before making a decision, in the way we suppress our creativity because we're afraid it won't be well received. We imagine that there is some invisible judge keeping score, and if we step out of line, we'll be marked as wrong. But the truth is, there is no such judge. The rules that you think you must obey are only agreements made up by other people. And those agreements shift constantly over time. What was once forbidden becomes normal. What was once scandalous becomes accepted. And what was once praised is later forgotten. If the standards of permission are always changing, then how could they ever be the true measure of your right to live as yourself? Consider how nature moves. A flower does not wait for the gardener to tell it when to bloom. The clouds do not ask if it's appropriate to cover the sun. The ocean does not wait for applause before it crashes into waves. Life simply moves because that is its nature, and in that same way you are life, moving. The only difference is that you have been taught to doubt this fact. You have been conditioned to think that before you can act, before you can express yourself, you must first be validated. But if the flower needed validation, it would never bloom. If the bird needed validation, it would never sing. And if you need validation, you may spend your entire life waiting instead of living. Notice how easily we confuse guidance with permission. Advice, rules, and traditions are often presented as if they are absolute truths, but they are simply patterns that others have found useful in their own lives. They may be helpful, yes, but they are not binding. Yet we treat them as though they hold authority over our very being. We hesitate to explore paths that others have not walked, forgetting that every path was once walked by someone for the first time. The great artists, thinkers, and visionaries of history did not wait for permission. In fact, their courage often came from ignoring it. When you realize that permission is an illusion, a strange sense of freedom arises. You see that the chains you thought were holding you back were never locked. They were only hanging loosely, waiting for you to notice. You can walk at any moment. But this realization is both liberating and terrifying, because it places the responsibility back in your hands. If there is no one to grant you permission, then there is no one to blame when you choose not to act. It means you are free, but also that you must own your freedom. This is why people cling so tightly to the illusion. It feels safer to believe that you need approval, because then your hesitation is not your fault. If you can say, "I'm not ready because no one has told me I am," then you can avoid the risk of living fully. But life does not care about your excuses. It does not wait for you to feel ready. It is happening now, with or without your permission slip. Every moment you hesitate, life continues. The river flows, whether you dip your toes in or not. And so the idea that you need permission is nothing more than a story you've been told. It is not reality, it is not truth. The reality is that you are already here, already alive, already breathing, No one has the authority to revoke that. The only real question is whether you will claim it, whether you will stop waiting and start living. The doors are open, the stage is set, and the only thing missing is your willingness to step forward. From the moment we are born, we are led to believe that somewhere, out there, is an invisible authority keeping track of whether we're playing the game of life correctly. We are taught to behave as though a referee stands at the edge of existence, whistle in hand, ready to blow if we step out of line. But have you ever noticed that no such figure appears? There is no cosmic judge flashing a red card when you make a mistake, no scoreboard where your worth is tallied up, no final committee meeting where your life will be graded like an exam. The idea that life requires supervision is simply a projection of our own insecurity, borrowed from the structures we've built in society. In reality, life has no referee, and it never did. Look at the world as it is. When a tree grows twisted and bent, there is no voice that condemns it for not being straight. When lightning strikes or the waves crash against the shore, there is no tribunal declaring that nature has broken a rule. Even within your own body, your heart does not seek approval before it beats. Your lungs do not ask for permission before they take in air. Existence itself has no overseer because it needs none. Existence itself has no overseer because it needs none. Everything that arises is simply part of the unfolding dance. And the notion of right and wrong is only applied afterward by human minds trying to categorize what is beyond categorization. This imagined referee is a shadow we create because we are uncomfortable with freedom. To be truly free means that no one is setting the limits for you, no one is handing you the script, no one is telling you when you're onside or offside. And while that should feel liberating, it often terrifies us, because without an official to appeal to, we must face the fact that we are responsible for our own movements. It is easier to imagine that someone else is watching and scoring, because then our hesitation, our fear, our refusal to act can be justified. We say to ourselves, I can't do this until it's approved, until it's official, until it's been certified. Yet all the while, life moves forward, unbothered by these self-imposed constraints. Think about the way we design systems. Schools, workplaces, governments, they are filled with referees. Teachers grading our papers, bosses reviewing our performance, authorities deciding what is permitted and what is forbidden. These structures serve a function in organizing human affairs, but they are not the same as life itself. School is not life, work is not life, government is not life. They are constructs layered on top of life, and yet we mistake these systems for reality. We forget that before these rules existed, the sun still rose, rivers still flowed, and people still loved, laughed, and died. Existence has always moved without needing anyone to regulate it. The danger of living as though there is a referee is that you begin to censor yourself. You begin to live cautiously, carefully, trying to avoid imaginary penalties. You hold back words you long to speak. You restrain actions you long to take. Because somewhere in the back of your mind you think, what if this isn't allowed? But ask yourself, allowed by whom? The people you think are keeping score are too busy keeping track of their own perceived rules, and the referee you fear is nowhere to be found. All that remains is your own hesitation. And consider how inconsistent these so-called rules are. What is praised in one culture is condemned in another. What is legal in one country is outlawed across the border. What is celebrated in one century is ridiculed in the next. If there truly were a universal referee, would the standards shift so drastically? The fact that they do shows that the rules are invented, not discovered. They are agreements, not eternal laws. And if they are agreements, then you are free to renegotiate them at any time. Imagine a child learning to walk. No referee steps in to call a foul when the child falls. Falling is simply part of learning. But as adults, we treat our mistakes as violations, as if there is some cosmic penalty box waiting for us if we fail. In reality, falling is still just part of learning. The difference is that now we've been taught to shame ourselves, to assume that every misstep is evidence that we are breaking some great rule of life. Yet when you look honestly, you see that mistakes are simply life experimenting through you. There is no whistle, no red card, only the ongoing process of growth. When you drop the belief in a referee, a new kind of courage emerges. You realize that you are not being watched by some stern authority, and so you can move more freely, take risks, play more fully. Life becomes less about obeying and more about exploring. You begin to understand that your worth was never conditional, never tied to performance, never dependent on playing the game correctly. The game has no official rules. The only rules are the ones we agree to. And you are free at any moment to play differently. This is why nature feels so liberating. When you walk through a forest, you do not feel judged by the trees. When you listen to the waves, you do not imagine they are critiquing you. Nature simply is, and in its presence you are reminded that you too are simply here. The referee is a phantom that vanishes the moment you see it clearly. You are free not because someone has declared it, but because life itself does not know how to bind you. The sun rises without permission, the stars burn without approval, and you too are part of that same freedom. From the earliest days, we are handed a series of names, titles, and masks. You are told you are a son or a daughter. Later, you are called a student, a worker, a citizen, perhaps a husband or wife, a parent, a provider. With each stage of life, another mask is pressed against your face, and you begin to identify with it so completely that you forget the face beneath. We start to imagine that we are the role, and the role is all there is. Yet if you pause and truly look, you realize that roles are only costumes in a play, and the actor is something far greater, thereby creating all life. Am that life, unliving. Think of how we speak in introductions. I am a teacher, I am a doctor, I am an artist. But what does that mean? Is the teacher no longer a human when the classroom empties? Is the artist gone when the paintbrush is set down? These labels may describe activities, but they do not capture the essence of being. They are useful, yes, but they are not the truth. The truth is the awareness that plays all roles, the stage on which they appear, and the energy that flows through them. The danger of roles is not that we play them, but that we forget they are roles at all. Imagine an actor who steps onto the stage to play a king and never takes off the crown, even after the curtain falls. He begins to demand respect outside the theater, to insist that others bow to him in daily life. You would call him delusional. And yet we all do this. We carry the costumes of our social positions into every corner of our existence, forgetting that they were never meant to be permanent. This confusion leads to suffering. A person who identifies only as a parent is devastated when the children grow and leave. A person who sees themselves only as their career feels worthless when retirement comes. The roles change, but the actor remains. If you think you are the mask, you will be lost when the mask is taken away. But if you recognize that you are the one wearing it, you can play the role fully and joyfully, and then set it down when it is time, without fear of losing yourself. Consider how deeply this identification runs. When someone criticizes our job, our beliefs, or our culture, we take it personally, as though they have attacked our very being. But what they are touching are the clothes we wear, not the self that wears them. The roles are fragile. They can be questioned, challenged, even destroyed. But the awareness beneath them cannot be harmed. That awareness is not limited by job titles, nationalities, religions, or reputations. It is something much vaster, like the space that holds every form without being defined by any of them. And yet we are frightened by the thought of letting go of these roles. We cling to them because they give us a sense of security, a way to define ourselves in the eyes of others. We want to say, this is who I am, and point to something tangible, something measurable. But in doing so, we trade the fluid, boundless reality of our being for a narrow identity that can crumble at any time. It is like mistaking the wave for the whole ocean. A wave rises, takes shape, and falls back again. But the ocean remains. If you think you are only the wave, you will fear the fall. But if you know yourself as the ocean, the rise and fall are simply part of your movement. The world itself reinforces this confusion. From childhood, you are praised for playing roles well. Be a good student, get good grades. Be a good employee, follow the rules. Be a good spouse, meet expectations. These are performances measured by criteria others have invented, and we begin to measure our worth the same way. But who decided that your value is determined by test scores, paychecks, or approval ratings? These measures are like stage directions. They serve the performance, but they do not define the actor. To see through this illusion is not to reject roles altogether. Life is a theater, and we all have parts to play. You may play the role of a mother, a leader, an artist, a friend. These roles are meaningful, but they are not ultimate. They are expressions of the deeper reality moving through you. The danger lies in forgetting that you are more than the part you play. Just as the moon reflects the light of the sun, but is not the sun itself, the roles reflect the presence of life, but are not the source of it. Think about how liberating it is to laugh at your own role, to see it lightly as a mask you wear for a time. You can play the part with sincerity without mistaking it for your totality. When you recognize this, you stop taking yourself so seriously. You stop defending every opinion, every title, every achievement, as though your existence depended on it. You realize that the actor can take on many parts without being limited to any one of them. This perspective also transforms how you see others. You begin to notice that the people you meet are also wearing masks. The stern boss is an actor in a role. The impatient stranger is caught in a performance. Even your parents, whom you once saw as authorities, are simply people playing their parts. This realization softens judgment. It reminds you that behind every role, no matter how convincing, is the same awareness that you feel in yourself. And so compassion arises not from effort, but from recognition. Life becomes a play, not in the sense of triviality, but in the sense of creativity. You are free to experiment, to shift roles, to take on new expressions, because you are no longer clinging to the idea that any single one defines you. You are free to succeed and fail, to rise and fall, to laugh and weep, because none of it threatens your reality. The masks come and go, but the actor never disappears. And when you truly see this, something shifts within you. You no longer waste energy pretending to be only the mask. You no longer need to defend an image. You can finally relax into the deeper truth of what you are. Something ungraspable, something beyond definition, something that can never be reduced to a label. And in that relaxation, you find the freedom to play every role with joy, knowing that the stage may change, the script may shift, but the presence that animates it all is endlessly, beautifully you. When you look closely at the natural world, you begin to see a truth that is so simple, it almost feels too obvious. Life does not wait for permission. The grass pushes through cracks in the pavement, the river carves valleys through stone. The bird sings in the morning whether or not anyone is listening. The tree does not hold back its blossoms until someone says, "Yes, it's time now." The waves do not pause at the shore waiting for a signal to crash. They move because moving is their nature, and in that movement is their freedom. And yet, human beings have wrapped themselves in hesitation. We stop ourselves before we begin, second-guessing every impulse, worrying about how it will be received, wondering if we are allowed. We forget that we are not separate from nature. We are not some foreign creature dropped into the world with different rules. We are made of the same earth, the same elements, the same energy as the stars and rivers and trees. And if nature does not ask, then neither do we need to. The hesitation is not life's command. It is only our conditioning. Think about how strange it is that a flower blooms simply because it blooms. And yet a person feels they must justify their every action. The flower does not ask, "Is this the right color for me? Will others approve of my petals? Am I worthy of the sunlight?" It opens because opening is what it does. The bird does not sing for applause or to meet a quota of notes. It sings because song flows naturally from its being. The river does not compare itself to other rivers to see if it is doing enough. It simply runs. And in running, it shapes mountains. This is the great lesson of nature, that life is self-expressing, self-moving, and self-renewing. It does not wait for conditions to be perfect. It does not postpone itself until someone claps or nods in approval. It simply unfolds. And when you see this clearly, you begin to wonder why you, as a part of nature, believe that you must live differently. We often think of ourselves as separate from the world around us, as if nature is out there and we are here observing it. But you are not standing outside of nature, you are inside it. You are it. The same force that makes the tree reach upward makes you breathe. The same rhythm that pulls the tide in and out pulls your heart to beat. And if the tree does not ask, if the tide does not ask, this misunderstanding comes from the stories we've inherited. Human beings invented rules, traditions, and systems to organize society. And then we confused those inventions with the laws of life itself. Society says you must earn respect, approval, or authority before you act. But nature does not play by those rules. The sun does not earn the right to rise, it rises. The spring does not earn permission to melt the snow, it melts. These movements are not debated or voted on. They simply happen. And you too are an expression of that same spontaneity. Look at a child before it is trained to seek approval. It laughs, cries, dances, explores without hesitation. It does not ask, "Is this acceptable?" It acts because life itself is surging through it. Only later do we teach the child to pause, to conform, to wait for a signal before moving. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to reclaim the freedom we had before we learned to doubt. Nature shows us again and again that life thrives without permission. The weeds sprout where they are not wanted. The wind rearranges the landscape without consulting anyone. Even in the darkest forest, where no human eye may ever see, plants grow and flowers bloom in perfect indifference to whether they will be appreciated. Life does not perform for recognition. It performs because performance is simply being. When you begin to see yourself as part of this, something loosens inside you. You no longer need to justify your existence, because existence itself is the justification. You no longer need to explain why you wish to create, to love, to express, because those desires are as natural as the river's current. The bird does not explain its song, it sings. And in the same way, you can live as yourself without explanation. Notice how much energy is wasted in waiting. We postpone dreams because we are unsure if it's the right time. We silence our voices because we fear others won't approve. We hide our creativity because we wonder if it will be accepted. But in that waiting, life slips by. The river does not wait for the perfect alignment of stones before it flows. It flows, and in flowing, finds its way. You are meant to do the same. And here is the beauty. When you stop asking, you discover that the world responds more naturally to you. People are drawn to authenticity, the way flowers turn toward the sun. When you live without needing permission, your presence itself becomes magnetic, because it resonates with the truth that everyone secretly longs to remember. That life is not meant to be contained or authorized, but lived. So when you feel the hesitation rising, when you feel yourself shrinking back, look at the tree outside your window. Look at the sky, at the clouds drifting without asking where they may go. Look at the ocean, which has been moving ceaselessly long before anyone was here to notice it. These are reminders that your place in existence does not need approval. You are already part of the great unfolding. And the unfolding does not stop to ask whether it is allowed. It moves, it grows, it breathes, and so do you. We live in a world that subtly conditions us to crave validation. From the time we are children, we're rewarded with smiles, applause, gold stars, and praise when we behave according to expectations. When we grow older, the stage becomes bigger, but the game remains the same. Now the validation comes in the form of approval from peers, supervisors, partners, and society at large. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the belief that our worth is tied to how well we are accepted and approved. This craving for validation becomes a trap, because the moment your sense of self is placed in someone else's hands, you've given away the very freedom to simply be. Think about how exhausting it is to constantly wonder what others think of you, the way you dress, the way you speak, the career you pursue, the person you choose to love. All of it filtered through the question, will they approve? What a strange way to live, as if you're on a stage where everyone else is the judge and you're forever auditioning. And yet, most of the time, those very judges are too wrapped up in their own insecurities, worried about whether you approve of them. It's a dance of masks, each of us presenting a version that we think will be acceptable while hiding the raw, honest self within. The tragedy here is not only that you lose your authenticity, but also that you never truly know what it feels like to live without conditions. You become cautious, measuring each move, silencing your instincts, and suppressing your desires. This is why so many people feel restless inside, as if life is happening somewhere else, as if they are always preparing for a moment that never arrives. They are waiting for a nod of approval, for someone to say, yes, you are allowed. But that nod doesn't come because no one else has the authority to grant it. Imagine a singer who refuses to sing until the crowd first applauds. It's absurd, isn't it? Yet, in a very real way, that's how many live, waiting for applause before expressing themselves. But the applause was never meant to come first. It comes after, if at all. And even if it doesn't, the song still has to be sung. When you let the hunger for validation dictate your choices, you're like that singer, holding the song hostage until the world approves. And in that waiting, life passes you by. You'll notice that the moments when you feel most alive are often the moments when you've forgotten about approval altogether. When you're absorbed in creating, playing, laughing, or exploring, the thought of validation disappears. In those states, you are simply yourself, without filters. You are not acting for anyone, and it's in those moments that your true essence shines most brightly. Ironically, those are often the very moments others find most inspiring. People respond to authenticity because it carries a power that imitation cannot. The paradox is that when you stop seeking validation, you often receive it naturally, but now it no longer enslaves you. Seeking constant approval also breeds fear. Fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of being misunderstood. And fear narrows life. It keeps you from taking risks, from speaking your truth, from venturing into unknown territory. Yet everything worthwhile, everything alive, exists beyond that line of fear. To live fully is to risk disapproval, to stand in your own skin without apology. What you gain in return is far greater than fleeting validation. You gain the experience of your own freedom. Consider how different life would be if trees sought validation before growing their branches. Imagine if a river paused its flow, waiting for the world to nod in agreement. It would be madness. But we humans, with our peculiar self-consciousness, often forget that our essence is as natural as a tree or a river. Life flows through you. Your laughter, your art, your voice, your love, all are expressions of that flow. To wait for permission is to dam the river, to hold back the song. The truth is, no amount of external approval will ever satisfy the hunger for validation, because the real hunger is for self-acceptance. You could receive applause from the whole world and still feel hollow inside if you have not given yourself permission to be. External validation is a moving target. You meet one standard, only to be faced with another. But self-acceptance is solid ground. It is the realization that you are enough as you are, without conditions, without the need for applause. It's liberating to realize that the people whose approval you crave are themselves craving approval from someone else. The boss who demands your obedience is anxious about their own superiors. The friend who judges you harshly is worried about being judged by others. The cycle goes on endlessly. Once you see this, you begin to laugh at the game. You begin to step out of it, realizing that your worth doesn't need to be measured on this imaginary scoreboard of approval. When you release yourself from the trap of validation, you begin to live in a way that feels unshackled. You say what you mean, you follow what excites you, you allow yourself to stumble, to fail, to get it wrong, because now you are no longer performing for others, you are simply living. And that living, raw and imperfect as it may be, is infinitely richer than any polished performance that wins applause. The trap of validation is that it tells you freedom comes after approval, when in fact freedom comes first, and approval, if it comes at all, is simply an echo. The key is to see through the illusion, to stop waiting for someone else to hand you the certificate of authenticity. You are authentic by nature. You always were. The only one who needed to see it was you. Life, if you really look at it, doesn't follow neat lines, tidy categories, or predictable patterns. It is not a straight road with carefully painted markers telling you where to go and when to stop. It is more like a river, winding, bending, sometimes rushing, sometimes still, but always moving. To be alive is to be part of that flow, with all its turbulence and calm, with all its beauty and chaos. Yet most of us have been taught to believe that before we can live fully, we must have order, we must have certainty, we must have everything lined up perfectly. But that is not how life works. And if you wait for conditions to be flawless, you will spend your entire existence waiting, never stepping into the dance that is happening right now. The messiness of life is not a flaw, it is its essence. Think of how forests grow, branches twisting in different directions, roots tangled deep in the soil, leaves falling and decaying to nourish new growth. It is not symmetrical, and yet it is perfect in its own wild way. The same is true of the ocean, with its waves colliding and crashing, never the same twice. This is how life unfolds. Unpredictable, surprising, sometimes painful, sometimes joyous, but always alive. And in that aliveness, there is beauty, even when it doesn't fit the script you thought you were supposed to follow. The trouble comes when we try to impose too much control. When we think being alive means ironing out every crease, eliminating every uncertainty, polishing ourselves until there is nothing raw left. In doing so, we sterilize our own existence. We forget that it is precisely the mess, the cracks, the surprises, and even the mistakes that give life its richness. A conversation that stumbles into awkwardness can also stumble into intimacy. A failure that shatters your plans can open a door you never knew existed. The uncertainty that terrifies you can just as easily thrill you if you lean into it. But if you keep holding back, waiting for life to make sense before you participate, you'll miss the very texture of being alive. It is astonishing how much energy we waste trying to stage manage our lives into neat little boxes. We edit ourselves before we speak, suppress our feelings before they are expressed, plan every step as though life is a chessboard. And yet the moments we treasure most are rarely the ones we could have planned. They are the spontaneous laughs, the accidents that turn into adventures, the unplanned encounters that change the course of everything. These moments arrive not because we controlled life, but because we allowed it to be messy. And in that mess, we found something real. Being alive means embracing imperfection, not as something to be tolerated until it is fixed, but as the very texture of existence itself. You do not need to get it all together before you are worthy of joy. You do not need to solve every uncertainty before you can feel peace. Waiting for the perfect conditions is like waiting for the ocean to stop making waves before you go for a swim. The waves are not the obstacle, they are the experience. Think of music. If every note were the same, there would be no song, only monotony. The beauty comes from the rise and fall, the pauses, the unexpected shifts. Life is the same. It is a composition of highs and lows, harmony and dissonance, rhythm and silence. To live is to feel that entire spectrum, not just the polished parts. And when you allow yourself to experience it fully, without trying to constantly edit and control, you discover a depth of being that was hidden behind your resistance. Of course, there will be moments when things fall apart, when the chaos feels overwhelming, but even then, notice that the world does not end. Out of endings, new beginnings arise. Out of loss, new directions appear. Out of confusion, new clarity is born. The very act of being alive is a process of creation and destruction, of growth and decay. The flower blooms and withers. The sun rises and sets. The tide comes in and goes out. Why would you imagine your own life should be any different? To be alive is to be part of this endless cycle. And it is through the cycle, not despite it, that meaning is found. It takes courage to accept that life is not tidy, that you cannot choreograph every detail, that uncertainty is not a mistake, but the ground on which existence stands. Yet in accepting this, a tremendous weight lifts. You no longer need to spend your days polishing yourself into an image of perfection for the world. You no longer need to wait for some mythical right time to begin living. You begin to see that now, in this imperfect moment, in this mess, in this chaos, you are already alive. And that is enough. The irony is that the more you embrace life's messiness, the more alive you feel, and the less trapped you are by the fear of mistakes or disapproval. You laugh more freely, love more deeply, create more boldly. You begin to taste the fullness of life, not just sip at it cautiously. For aliveness is not a matter of perfection. It is a matter of presence. To be present in the middle of uncertainty, to open your arms to the unknown, to breathe into the mess rather than resist it. That is what it means to be alive. And when you see life this way, you discover that the very thing you thought was holding you back, the unpredictability, the imperfection, the mess, was in fact the doorway to freedom. For freedom is not the absence of chaos. It is the willingness to dance with it. It is to step onto the floor without needing the choreography mapped out. To trust that the music will carry you even when you don't know the steps. This is what it means to live. Not later, not when it all makes sense, not when you have earned permission, but now in the beautiful, chaotic, unrepeatable mess of this very moment. There is within each of us a rhythm, a kind of silent pulse that beats quietly beneath all the noise of the world. It isn't the heartbeat, though it often feels just as alive. It is that subtle current of being that whispers, "This is you." Most of the time we are too distracted to hear it. We are so occupied by the chatter of society, by the demands of others, by the clamor of obligations, that we forget this inner music is even playing. And yet when you pause, when you allow yourself to be still, you notice that there is something steady and unshakable within you, something that doesn't ask for permission, something that simply is. From childhood, we are taught to tune ourselves to external rhythms. The ringing of the school bell, the ticking of the clock, the deadlines, the appointments, the schedules, all of it forms a kind of mechanical beat we are expected to march to. And if we fall out of sync with that, we are told we are failing. But have you noticed that this external rhythm, while useful in its way, always feels imposed? It doesn't arise from within you, it is something pressed upon you. When you live solely according to it, you become a kind of machine, efficient perhaps, but hollow. The inner rhythm, by contrast, is organic, flowing, unpredictable, and utterly your own. It is the song of your being. And when you learn to listen to it, you find yourself moving differently through life, not as a cog in a machine, but as a dancer in a cosmic play. The trouble is that most people have been taught to distrust this inner rhythm. They worry that if they follow their own beat, they will go astray, they will disappoint others, they will lose their place in the world. And so they smother it, burying their natural impulses under layers of duty, expectation, and fear. Yet the cost of this smothering is enormous. It is why so many feel restless, even when they have done everything they were supposed to do, followed the rules, kept in time with the external world, earned the praise of others, and still there is a hollowness. That hollowness is the sound of the rhythm within, trying to be heard, reminding you that life was not meant to be lived entirely by someone else's song. When you do dare to listen, something remarkable happens. You begin to sense that your inner rhythm is not separate from life itself, but part of a larger harmony. Just as a drummer finds their place in the music, your inner pulse aligns with the greater pulse of existence. The movement of the seasons, the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of the tides, all of these are rhythms. Life itself is a symphony of rhythms, and your being is one expression of that. The more you resist your own rhythm, the more discordant life feels. The more you allow it, the more you feel at home in the universe. There is a reason why moments of authenticity feel so exhilarating. When you speak words you truly mean, when you laugh from the belly, when you move freely without thinking of how you look, these are moments when you are aligned with your rhythm. You are no longer acting according to a script. You are flowing in time with your own pulse. And in that state, everything feels more alive. Time seems to shift, worries fade, and even the simplest action feels radiant with significance. That is what it means to live by your rhythm. Of course, the world will not stop demanding things of you. There will still be bills, responsibilities, and expectations, but the difference is in how you carry them. When you are disconnected from yourself, duties feel like chains. When you are tuned to your rhythm, those same duties can become expressions of who you are. Cooking a meal, doing your work, speaking to a friend, all of it becomes infused with presence, with life, with flow. The task may be the same, but the energy you bring is entirely different, because it comes from alignment rather than obligation. It is worth remembering that the rhythm within is not something you create. It is something you discover. You cannot manufacture it through effort or force. It is not about trying to become someone different. It is about noticing what is already there. Often the best way to hear it is in stillness, in quiet moments, when the world falls away. Sometimes it comes in meditation, sometimes in a walk through nature, sometimes in those rare moments when you are so immersed in what you love that the sense of trying disappears. It is always there, waiting for your attention, but it cannot be demanded, only allowed. Many people fear that if they follow this rhythm, it will lead them into chaos. But the truth is, it leads you into authenticity. It may not look neat, it may not please everyone, but it will feel real. And realness has its own kind of order, one that is far deeper than the superficial order imposed by society. It is like jazz music. On the surface, it may seem unpredictable, but underneath it flows with a perfect sense of timing and harmony. Your rhythm may not look like anyone else's, and that is precisely the point. The universe has no use for copies. It sings through each of us in a unique voice. The courage it takes to follow your rhythm is the same courage it takes to live freely. It means risking disapproval, stepping into the unknown, letting go of the illusion that you must always be in control. But what you gain is incomparable. You gain a sense of being at home in your own skin. You gain the joy of knowing that even in uncertainty, you are living truthfully. You gain the freedom of no longer waiting for permission to exist as yourself. And perhaps the most beautiful discovery of all is that when you tune into your rhythm, life begins to respond. Doors open unexpectedly, synchronicities appear, people who resonate with your frequency find their way to you. It is as though the world, hearing you play your true note, adjusts itself to harmonize with you. What once felt like struggle begins to feel like flow. Not because life has suddenly become easy, but because you are no longer fighting against yourself. This rhythm within you is not a small thing. It is the echo of life itself, beating in your chest, whispering in your silence, urging you to be who you already are. To ignore it is to miss the song. To follow it is to live. And that choice, quietly and powerfully, is yours in every moment.